Okay, good evening, everybody, both here in person in our community room at the Princeton Public Library and virtually online on our YouTube channel. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this presentation tonight that the library is pleased to be co-presenting with HiTOPS, a local organization here in town that supports LGBTQ youth and does a health sexual education. I'm Janie Herman. I am the public programming librarian here at Princeton Public Library, and I've had the great pleasure of working with HiTOPS for many, many years on a variety of events. And when they reached out to us to say that they really felt that this was needed in our community right now to have a discussion about the aftermath of the election and what it means for the LGBTQ plus community, we went into high gear to put it together, and I'm so pleased that we did. And so without further ado, I'm going to welcome Lisa Shelby to come up to the microphone. She's the executive director. She's going to introduce our speakers. And I will say for anybody here in person, we do have a hearing loop in this room. So if you have a T-coil enabled hearing device, you can turn that on now. And restrooms are out to the right, and make sure your phone is silenced. And I think we're ready to go. So welcome, Lisa Shelby.
Hey, everybody. So good to be here. As Janie said, I'm Lisa Shelby. I'm the executive director at HiTOPS. I use she, her pronouns. And welcome. Thank you for being here. We were really, we felt really compelled to put together this workshop for our community, and felt compelled because we feel that education about what's going on is just so very important, as well as providing the ways in which we can take care of ourselves, the ways that we can become active in the community. And, you know, we're in this together, and I think that's really the most important thing. So with that, I'm going to introduce AJ Fresco and Thomas Foley, staff at HiTOPS, and they're going to kind of give you a bit more information about our organization and about themselves. So welcome.
Hello, everybody. It is so nice to see you. Hello, friends online. We're so grateful to Janie and all of you at the library, so thank you again. So yes, as Lisa was saying, we feel very strongly about providing information to folks who are understandably maybe fearful or simply seeking more knowledge. And so we're going to do our best tonight to give an overview. I'll share the agenda with you all in a moment, but first let me introduce myself, and I'll let AJ introduce themselves as well. My name is Thomas Foley. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a former classroom teacher. I am a former school counselor. I worked right here at the Princeton Public School District. I'm a provisionally licensed mental health counselor. I teach graduate counseling courses at Rider and Georgian Court Universities, and I'm working on my PhD in counselor education and supervision. So very counseling, mental health forward, and very passionate about supporting our youth, particularly our LGBTQ youth. My research is currently focused on LGBTQ-related education legislation and its impact on kiddos in school. Really happy to be here with you all tonight.
Thanks, Thomas. Hi, everyone. I'm AJ. My pronouns are they, he. I am the LGBTQ plus support manager at HiTOPS, so I run a lot of our youth programming, as well as a lot of our events, our community programming. I'm a social worker. I'm a licensed social worker in New Jersey. I have experience being a school social worker, being a high school teacher, doing some work in the criminal justice field as well, but currently at HiTOPS, and then I'm also a professor at Rutgers, where I teach sexual and gender diversity to graduate students, and I'm also getting my doctorate, like Thomas, in social work, and my research right now is focusing on helping improve access to affirming mental health care for LGBTQ folks, as well as their parents and families. And yeah, the other important thing, I have a small business called Rainbow Connected. That's, you know, part of what this was created with. And I do education on LGBTQ plus related topics, diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting, and all that kind of fun stuff. So excited to talk to y'all a little bit about all this today and hopefully clear up some misconceptions and make everybody feel hopefully better, maybe
Yes,
worse.
that's the goal. A little bit more about HiTOPS before we dive into what we prepared for you all today. HiTOPS is a nonprofit organization. We're coming up on 30 years of existing, and our mission statement is to provide inclusive and youth-informed sex education and support and build affirming communities to foster strong and healthy young people of all identities. You see the cornerstones of our mission underlined there. We do our best to be inclusive, which means providing equitable access for young people. One example of that is we host free weekly support groups, both in person and online, for LGBTQ kids and teens. We also provide transportation to folks who want to come in person and maybe don't have access otherwise. We are youth informed, which is my favorite thing about our organization, and I think what sets us apart from many other organizations that do what we do. We have a youth advisory board at HiTOPS, and we conduct a lot of professional development and education for both students and youth-serving professionals. Our youth advisory board sits with our education staff and goes through the content, and I get to talk directly with the young people and hear from them what their experience is like in schools and do my best to accurately reflect that experience so that I can teach the adults in their life how to better affirm them. It's really special and really what makes us unique. And of course, we are affirming to people of all identities. And I do just want to touch on this word affirming for a moment. At its simplest, to be affirming is to acknowledge and accept another person's identity. It's to believe someone when they tell you who they are, even if or when it changes. It's really important to us to define it in that way because, again, we want to accurately reflect the lives of our students, and we want to let them know they are seen, they are heard, they are valued. A little bit more about us and what we offer. I mentioned our free weekly support groups for youth, and we also have a support group for parents of trans and non-binary young people. If you are interested in learning more about our support groups, you can check us out online. There'll be a link up later on in the presentation. We have drop-in hours where we invite youth to come in and just hang at HiTOPS, our center right here in Princeton, and kiddos will come. They can borrow a book from our lending library. They can check out our closet of free clothing and gender-affirming products and clothing. Or they could just hang out, have a good time, hang with other kids that they might have something in common with. We provide education and consulting on SOGI and sexual health. SOGI, if you're not familiar with that acronym, is sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. As the senior education manager at HiTOPS, my primary duty is to go into schools, corporations, and community-based organizations and provide professional development and learning opportunities for people working with youth. And sometimes not even, because this information about SOGI and sexual health and DEI, all of these things are relevant in our lives as we interact with others in our communities. We have our youth leadership programming. Would you like to talk about that?
We have a group for folks who are 18 to 24 years old called the Young Adult Spot. They help plan a lot of our events, some of the education stuff that we talked about. And then we have our Trans Youth Forum, which is made up of our Trans Youth Advisory Board. Oh, I didn't realize it was on there. Perfect. And the folks who are on our Trans Youth Advisory Board are all trans-identified folks, and they help us put together this big event that we do every year in March. It's actually our 10th year this year, so we're doing a big celebration for that. And we host different trans icons, folks who have all different kinds of careers, experiences to talk with some of our youth members, answer questions, and we spotlight a lot of other trans-owned and LGBTQ-owned businesses and organizations. And we've also got the closet, which provides free gender-affirming items, hygiene products, makeup, and all that good stuff to youth who are interested. And we also have our lending library, which currently has over 600 books that are all by and for LGBTQ folks. And then we have some of our other special events as well. I already mentioned the Trans Youth Forum. We also host a queer prom every year. We host Queer Career Day, along with a whole bunch of other fun stuff. We always got something going on. So
Absolutely. So check us out, hitops.org. We'll throw up our socials at the end there so you can stay in touch with us. Now, for today, as you probably saw, the title of this session is, the election aftermath and how it's affecting LGBTQ folks in New Jersey. And so I just ask that you do participate. If you're here in person and you have a question, we're gonna have an opportunity at the end and we're gonna open it up for a panel discussion and we invite your questions. but of course don't require you to ask any. We ask that you listen respectfully, of course, to us and to folks who do choose to ask questions. And we recognize that this is a brave space. And what I mean by that is it can take courage to engage in these conversations. These conversations to some can feel polarizing. And I think even just putting yourself out there to ask a question takes a bit of courage. And I want to acknowledge that courage. I want to acknowledge how amazing it is that you're here or that you're tuning in at home. And I want to thank you. And of course, we ask you to practice self-care. If there are moments throughout that you're feeling like you need to tune out, or that some information that we'll be presenting is triggering to you or bringing up some emotion, go to the restroom, take a walk, come back when you're ready to do so. Today, our goal number one, and a big piece of this, is going to be reviewing the lay of the land for LGBTQ folks in New Jersey. What do laws, protections look like? What may or may not change due to the outcome of the presidential election? We're then going to discuss some of the different advocacy efforts taking place and different organizations that you could get involved with should you choose to. I know for some, and this will lead into our third piece here, a great coping mechanism is getting involved. And so we'll talk a little bit about advocacy, and then we'll, of course, identify helpful resources, other coping mechanisms, and discuss strategies for self-care and for collective care. Now, this is going to be a lot, right? We all know the outcome of the election, and I'm sure many of us in this room and watching at home are feeling it, are feeling that we are going to be impacted, or the people we love may be impacted. And so I want to invite everybody in the room and at home to just take a moment, take a deep breath with me on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And let it out. We're going to get into some stuff that might invoke some feeling. And so I wanted to prepare you for that as we dive in with first, the national landscape. A very, very brief overview. We're here to talk about our lives as community members here in New Jersey, but we can't do that without first just offering a glimpse into what the national landscape looks like. And so this is a big image here, one that might feel or seem confusing at first glance. This map comes from a source called the Movement Advancement Project, MAP. They have wonderful interactive maps on their website that will take you through all of the different policies that will score, honestly, the states on their inclusion. And so you see here in the dark green, we see states with high overall policy that is supportive of LGBTQ youth. So we see New Jersey is that indeed high overall state with some wonderful protections built in for our community members that we'll go through in more detail in a little bit. And then we'll skip down and we'll just point out the red. There's a whole scale here that you can see. We're not going to spend too much time talking about every state. If you were interested in learning more about a particular state because maybe you have a loved one there, or maybe you're from there, or maybe you plan on moving there, we encourage you to check out this source here. If you are looking for these sources that we'll be discussing throughout this presentation, I also want to invite you to reach out to us. Our contact information will be listed on our very last slide. I'll say it out loud once for now, and we'll show it later. tfoley@hitops.org. Fresco@hitops.org. You can reach out to either or both of us, and we will share these resources directly with you. Is there anything more you wanted to say about the national landscape before we move into our detailed slide?
Yeah, I think the only thing I want to mention is that I feel like sometimes we can celebrate, like, yay, we live in a state that has really great policy and is supportive. And, thank goodness we don't live in some of these red states. And like Thomas said, acknowledging that we still might have loved ones there, or think about traveling there or moving there, and that there are queer people in all of these places. I have been to many of the states that are dark red there and have had, good experiences and some not so good experiences, but the reality is that it is not just easy for people to pick up and move or to leave their lives or their plans. And so it is important for us to be talking about and advocating for inclusive policies and more in all of these places, not just seeing these darker green states as, okay, well, this is a safe haven, or they can just go there, or people should move, because that's not an option for everyone. That's not a solution for everyone. So I think while this gives us a good picture of where some places are, that right now there are more policy protections, knowing that there are still people doing this very hard work in those red and orange states that you see on this map, and we're not giving up on those places, even though today we're going to focus mainly on New Jersey and talk about a little bit of the general federal policies. So like Thomas said, please reach out to us if you're interested in learning more about any of these other places. I can't guarantee we're going to be as much of an expert on them, but we might have some information, and we definitely have resources we can connect you to for any of these, any place.
Absolutely. So when we consider different rights that are under threat across our country, there's a few pockets of categories legislation falls into. So for one, we're looking at healthcare restrictions. Gender-affirming care bans are happening across the country. Medicaid and insurance coverage for gender-affirming care is not so much available, and prison healthcare restrictions as well. Before I move on to the next piece here, would you like to expand upon any of that, or just give the snapshot?
I think we'll snapshot it here.
Student and educator rights. This is something I'm particularly passionate about. Curriculum censorship, forced outing, school facilities bans, and school sports bans. So what this means, just to go into a little bit more detail, is that there are places in which it is not allowed. Discussions about sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression are simply banned. We're going to talk specifically about New Jersey. We are very fortunate to have inclusive curriculum legislation here. That is not so much the case in the majority of our country. Particularly, there are 7 states where it's extremely restricted, and those are some of the red states you saw on the previous map. Forced outing is when a school district mandates that if a kid were to come out as LGBTQ, the educator is meant to pick up the phone and out that child to their family. This can have severe consequences. We are not going to go in depth about percentages related to youth mental health, but it is extremely important to be aware that students who are living in homes that are not accepting are much more susceptible to depression, anxiety, and suicidality. Forced outing is particularly dangerous because we can't know or guarantee what a young person's home life is like. And so forced outing policies are extremely harmful for our young people. School facilities bans and sports bans, again, just look to isolate and ostracize trans and gender expansive youth. We have barriers to accurate identification. Do you want to expand upon that?
Yeah, just making it, more difficult or impossible for folks to change their names, update gender markers, birth certificates, passports, all that, very important stuff for a lot of aspects of our lives, making it more difficult to, to change those if you're trans in particular.
Yeah. Free speech and expression bans come in many forms, but we're seeing a lot of drag bans and book bans, and we are seeing book bans here in the state of New Jersey. We'll talk a little bit more about that.
Well, not anymore now. Yeah, I don't know. We can give a little clap because Governor Murphy signed. I was about to say it was signed here. Yeah, just a couple days ago. Very exciting. Was it 2 days ago or was it yesterday? Yesterday. So.
I was at the doctor. I watched on Facebook Live.
Yeah. So we no more book bans in New Jersey. Thankfully, it's not going to be hopefully a problem here, but.
And it'll be interesting to see how those discussions play out at these school boards that had enacted bans.
Definitely.
And then, of course, the weakening of civil rights laws. So redefining sex to exclude non-binary and trans folks, religious exemptions to non-discrimination laws, which of course puts LGBTQ people in harm's way. And we are worried about marriage. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that moving forward.
Hopefully set some of those concerns at ease in particular.
Absolutely. And bathroom bans.
Yeah, not much more to say about that.
Yeah.
All right, so, what might be coming next? I think that was the question for a lot of LGBTQ folks and our loved ones when, we got the news, Trump won the election, what's coming? So we know, ban on a ban on trans folks serving in the military. So we're expecting there to be some more of these policies presented, if not implemented. And then we also currently are looking at a Republican control of the House and Senate as well, which will make it more likely and possible for some of this legislation to get passed in the first place. We also know we have a conservative majority Supreme Court. If any of you have been following along with the recent case that was going on, or they were hearing arguments last week, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in detail in a couple of slides. But the conservative majority is obviously giving a lot of us cause for concern about what could happen, right? What could be overturned. I know a lot of people right away were talking about, is marriage equality going to be overturned, especially after Roe v. Wade was overturned. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of those and just kind of how that has the potential for a long-term impact. Yeah, oh, perfect. It's right now. Great, I love it. So on last Wednesday, the Supreme Court did hear the arguments on the case of U.S. v. Scrimetti. So this is the first major trans rights case to reach the Supreme Court that's specifically about trans rights. It's being brought against Tennessee's Law Senate Bill 1. So specifically, this is looking at stopping access to gender-affirming medical care for trans and non-binary youth, or minors in particular. And so the arguments that were being heard by the Supreme Court are not in relation to surgical care for minors, but just in relation to medication like hormone replacement therapy, so maybe testosterone or estrogen. We did have Chase Strangio, the first out trans lawyer to argue in front of the Supreme Court, so that is very cool to have a trans person actually representing trans people in front of the Supreme Court. And so, what might happen with this case, or what actually is being argued about? The plaintiffs, so Chase Strangio and the ACLU, are arguing that these particular bans in place with SB 1 are discriminating based on sex. And so that's really the kind of pivot point for this argument, right? So does this policy violate the Equal Protection Clause by discriminating based on sex? So, what they're arguing, or what they're trying to argue, the ACLU is trying to argue, is essentially that by providing gender-affirming care to cisgender folks, because that's happening and that is allowed with SB 1, right? So kids who maybe need puberty blockers, kids who maybe need testosterone or estrogen are able to get that as long as it's not because they're transgender. But if they are trans, then they are not allowed to get it. So that's basically what's happening. So they're saying, is that discrimination based on sex? Is that basically saying, well, this kid's biological sex is this, and so they're allowed to do it, but this kid's biological sex is this, so they're not allowed to do it, in the simplest terms possible. And I think I did, can you go back for 1 sec? Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a slide on there, or I'm sorry, a point on there at the bottom about Bostock v. Clayton County, which we'll talk again a little bit more about later. But in 2020, the Supreme Court did rule in favor of LGBTQ folks and basically found that employment discrimination against folks based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression is not allowed. And this was not a slim vote. I think it was a 6-3. So that was a good thing. That was 2020. Much of the court is the same. So it's a little interesting with this case to see how folks may vote similarly or different. Right, so it's very unlikely we're going to get a decision until June 2025. I think this is something people, are maybe learning about now, at least in my circles. They're like, wait, what? We're not going to get a decision for 6 months. But generally, that's what happens when the Supreme Court is hearing arguments. So what can happen, right? What are the possibilities? So the first thing, the outcome we're hoping for is that the Supreme Court will affirm the decisions that were made in lower courts, saying that this bill is violating the Equal Protection Clause, and it does discriminate based on sex. That is right. Either one of those, it's overturned. And then there's also the possibility that the bill is upheld. And so if it's upheld, there's the possibility that they will say there is discrimination based on transgender status. We, of course, know that that is happening. The question is if there is discrimination based on sex, right? Not just on transgender status, because currently there is no legal protection for discrimination or for protections based on trans status. So if they do find that this bill is not does not need to be overturned. It will stop gender-affirming care for minors in Tennessee currently, and it can potentially allow other states to pass or enforce the same types of bans on gender-affirming care for minors. It could also have an impact on gender-affirming care for adults, especially when we look at other cases that may be related to this equal protection clause, sex discrimination, right? When can this be applied and when can it not be applied? So if the Supreme Court makes this decision that this does not violate the equal protection clause, this law, SB1, does not discriminate on the basis of sex, there's the potential for them to apply that law again or that decision again in the future to say that, well, discriminating based on trans status is not discriminating based on sex. And so that would have a lot of potential ramifications for other laws in the future. I don't think, do we have another slide on this or no? I don't think so. So I will just say, because I think I saw a lot online after the arguments were done and we kind of maybe read the transcript or watched some videos or responses, that people seem to be thinking, okay, they're going to uphold this law, SB1, right? And that's possible. That might be what happens. And even if that is what happens, that is not the end of the world, right? I just told you some bad stuff that could potentially happen, but there are also a lot of other challenges being brought to similar gender-affirming care bans and other general, discrimination, bad things that are happening to trans folks. So this is, if they do uphold SB1, this is not immediate dismantling of all gender-affirming care in the country. It is not the immediate dismantling of access to gender-affirming care for minors. This is, in particular, just relating to this one ban in Tennessee. And even if this was found to be okay and upheld, this does not mean that automatically gender-affirming care will be taken away from folks everywhere. So these are just other potential ramifications, what we have on the slide. This could happen. This does not mean it will happen. It's really important to remember. Anything you want to add?
I think we're going to shift now into talking specifically about New Jersey. And so we're going to paint a picture of how things have been and what things have looked like. And then we're going to move forward into, okay, how might the outcome of the election have an impact, if it will have an impact. And so when we consider things that were happening already and protections that were in place for folks here, I'm just going to reveal them all so we have them. So we have a governor who has been very intentional in his support for LGBTQ folks, in that he's issued an executive order making New Jersey a shield state for gender-affirming care. We have so many things happening here. I want to specifically talk about education, but before I do that, I'm going to let you talk about any of these.
Yeah, I mean, this is a lot of great stuff that's happening. I think, a lot of it just revolves around us having people in our government in New Jersey who are thinking about LGBTQ folks and consciously, trying to work towards policies that benefit and prevent discrimination rather than actively hurt LGBTQ folks, which is wonderful. So I'll let Thomas talk more about.
So specifically, I wanted to focus on the fourth bullet here. So the guidance on transgender students for public school professionals in New Jersey is some of the most protective guidance that has been put out by a state legislature. So trans students in New Jersey have the right to be who they are. Meaning, if you have a student at a school, at a public school, that is asserting their gender identity, asserting their name, and asserting their pronouns, the educators and staff in that school are expected to affirm that individual, regardless of parent approval. I'll put in quotes there. So, as a person who worked as a school counselor for a few years, I had absolutely encountered a couple situations. I had encountered situations where I had trans and non-binary identified students whose parents were supportive. And of course, those were kind of the cases in which it was easy to help support that student, to know what that student needs, and then to provide this guidance to the teachers. Now, where it got a little more complicated was when there were students who were out and proud and happy to be who they were at school, but whose parents did not support. In those cases, I would remind parents and families of the guidance that's been put out by the state so that I, as a counselor and as an educator, could affirm that student. There were times when I would have a conference with a parent, and I'd be referring to the child by the name that they've asked me to refer to them as, and the parent would be referring to the child with the name that they assigned the child at birth. And so to any educators watching, school counselors watching, I know some of my former colleagues are watching online, those conversations can be really difficult, but the guidance is there. And so if you're an educator in a school, if you're a student in a school, know your right. And if you need some support, your administrators hopefully can provide that support to you. If you need an advocate, there are people who advocate for these students as well. So I just wanted to highlight how amazing that guidance has been from the state in affirming our kids.
And I'll add to that too, we're gonna have some resources at the end specifically about knowing your rights in different areas, different fields, and we can definitely provide you with those directly if you're interested. You should have them if you might need them, so have them on hand. We can help you get connected to those.
Absolutely. Just showing some more of kind of what the picture was before getting into how things may or may not change. We have anti-discrimination laws. We have no religious exemptions to anti-discrimination laws, of course, marriage equality, anti-bullying laws for LGBTQ students. Another one I'll just spend a moment to focus on as a former public school educator and someone who's very passionate about public education and access to education. New Jersey has a law referred to as the HIB law, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. Within that law, there are explicit and specific protections for students of all identities, and this includes race, ethnicity, ability level, and includes sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. Meaning if there was a child in school who was being harassed or targeted due to their identity, their sexual orientation, their gender identity, or their expression, that child and that child's family has the right to file what's called an HIB, and there would be a formal investigation conducted in the school and appropriate consequences delivered. Something that HiTOPS has done in the past and continues to help school districts with are, hey, when that education is required, maybe somebody has been a perpetrator of harassment, that student, we want to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? We want to educate, and we want to use restorative practices. And so there are many schools that will contact us either for resources or for help, and we will help them with some educational material for students who have been perpetrators against LGBTQ students or students perceived as LGBTQ. Schools are also mandated to teach about LGBTQ history and contributions. So there have been a couple really amazing laws passed in the last 5 years. So I think it was the 2019-2020 school year where it was first required that schools include in their curriculum to teach about the contributions of LGBTQ folks in history. There is no opt-out here. We have a DEI mandate in the state as well, which requires that K through 12, we are talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and that involves teaching about sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression in developmentally appropriate ways. It looks very different when you're teaching a lesson on sexual orientation. I put that in quotes because when I'm working with kindergarten through second, third, sometimes fourth graders, I might not even use the phrase sexual orientation, but we'll read literature that is inclusive and representative of queer folks. We have so many books at HiTOPS. We mentioned our lending library. Some of those are picture books for pre-K and kindergarten and first and second grade where it shows diverse families, So teaching about these topics looks very different depending on the grade we're in. And I think it's really important that we be transparent about that and let you all know that, when we go in and teach these things, because the law requires that schools do this, and of course schools will contact us to do that, we are doing it in ways in which we can connect with the students appropriately. One more thing I'll add about education before letting you take over is the most recent inclusive law passed is the inclusion of, or I'll say the evolution of the health and sexual health standards that are taught in schools. So, the standards are bracketed K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and high school. And within each of those, there is deliberate and intentional inclusion of discussions that I'm talking about. the one thing I want to share here is that families are still entitled to opt out of sexual health education due to religious reasons and other reasons. But we have these amazing inclusive curricular laws, and in speaking with the students directly, it means so much for these students to feel heard, seen, and represented. And I feel and hope that these laws are still so new that it's only going to get better and even more inclusive and representative.
Yeah, and despite these laws being new and the things that you see on the screen here, these are New Jersey's laws, so they will not, be automatically overturned when Trump takes office, or if we were to, have a Republican governor take office after our next gubernatorial election next year. So these are things that are enshrined in law in New Jersey. That's not going to change because of the election without a lot that would need to happen to change that. So I'm happy to talk about any of these more in depth or answer questions about them at the end, but this is, what we've got right now. So these are some of the bills that have been proposed in New Jersey over the past few years. There are, I believe, 9 active anti-LGBTQ bills that have been proposed in New Jersey state legislature. There are, I think, currently in the U.S. over 600 active anti-LGBTQ plus bills. Great that we only have 9. Still not great that we even have 9 at all. So again, none of these have been made law, right? These are just things that have been proposed. That does not mean it has any support, and hopefully none of these will become law, but it's also really important for us to know what actually is happening, right, in our home state, that there are legislators who are proposing, bills like this. So there are a lot related to education. They are mostly related to education. That's why we spend a lot of time on it. And most of them are to do with taking away a lot of the great curricular standards that have been implemented recently. So, removing that requirement for diversity, equity, inclusion, and just general, history about LGBTQ folks, and not just LGBTQ folks, but diverse identities and diverse perspectives in general. So you could, see a lot of those education ones on there. We also have one that is establishing a parent bill of rights, and you'll see similar types of language. I think on that previous slide you saw one was called the Child Innocence Protection Act. Child Innocence Protection Act, exactly. So there are, these titles that make it seem like they're trying to do something really, really good, right? Who wouldn't be in support of a parent bill of rights? But in particular, in this case, the parent bill of rights includes such things as allowing them to take their children out or opt their children out of instructional materials that are related to morality or related to sex or religion. They can decline to vaccinate their children, which is currently something that you need to be in public schools, and also just removing general sex education. So there's a lot there that's kind of in this bill that has some, some great things, right? And then also has some things that specifically remove the ability for children to engage in really important education. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I thought about it. Now I'm going to.
Go ahead.
So this parents' Bill of Rights situation, we see similar language, and we see legislation in other states being passed that kind of reflects this. And I just want to again reemphasize that sometimes school is the only safe space for an LGBTQ young person. I talked a little bit about the mental health implications earlier. It can be severe. It is life-saving that schools here in New Jersey are able to be that affirming place for students. So, proposed bills like that, really particularly all of this puts children at risk, puts more than just children at risk. But I just want to further emphasize that sometimes school is the only place a kid has. School, HiTOPS,
Yeah,
kids have
exactly.
HiTOPS too.
Yeah, and these bills are not just in relation to LGBTQ plus folks. Not all of them are, like the Parents' Bill of Rights in general, that includes the ability to opt your child out of general sex education, right? So making sure that your kid is not getting education on the way that their body might be developing as they enter puberty, or the way that, they might engage in sexual activity safely, consensually, completely giving the parents the ability to opt kids out of those classes, which we know are super important. When you look at the statistics on kids who have access to sexual health education versus those that only have abstinence-only sex education, we know that the outcomes are far better. There's lower rates of teen pregnancy, there's lower rates of STIs for folks who receive comprehensive sex education as opposed to folks who do not. So it's very important that kids have access to this, not just LGBTQ folks.
Absolutely. Now, I was talking about that amazing guidance that's been given to us from the state. And that guidance, is something I spoke very passionately about earlier. But we do have school districts that are repealing that guidance, and you can see my last bullet here. I'm not going to get into the specifics. This is just fact, though. This is public information. You can find districts and their policies online. If you were interested in a specific school district, all of it's public information. School board policies must be. But we finally see, guidance protections being taken away, being removed, and we have the New Jersey Superior Court pursuing cases against these districts, against districts specifically that are proposing or have enacted forced outing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think something important to add here with the transgender guidance that was developed by New Jersey, it's not mandated that the school districts adopt this. So the school districts that have in the past adopted this and that are now repealing it when it's been successfully in place for many years, those are, the ones that you see there, all had adopted this guidance initially by choice, right? It's there to help school districts know what to do to work with kids who are trans or non-binary and how to support them, right, and their families. So repealing this guidance is, they're allowed to do it, but also with the understanding that it's been successfully part of all of these schools' policies for many years, and we know now that this has just kind of become this hot button topic, and in particular in New Jersey, these townships and these school boards that are trying to repeal these policies are not really looking at what it's been used for or how it has been helpful in many of these districts, whereas now it's being repealed and they have nothing instead.
So now we'll talk about, okay, election happens, we have a new administration coming in. What does that mean for us here? I'm gonna let you.
Yeah, sure. I mentioned earlier, a lot of folks are really worried about marriage equality, right? That being overturned. But we know in New Jersey, the right to marry is enshrined in our state law. So again, even if the Supreme Court decision to make marriage equality or same-sex marriage illegal was to be overturned, we still in New Jersey have the right for folks to get married regardless of their sex assigned at birth or their gender marker. It is, not certain that they are going to repeal federal marriage equality, but if they were, it will most likely not impact the marriages of anyone in New Jersey. A lot of people I have also seen, okay, we better get married quick before it gets made illegal. That is not necessarily something that we should rush to do, and especially before you're ready, because it's likely not going anywhere in New Jersey in particular, but hopefully throughout the whole country, right? In order for the Obergefell decision to get overturned, a case would need to be brought to challenge that specifically to the Supreme Court, right? That's how it works. So that would be a whole long process. The Supreme Court would have to agree to take that case, so it's not going anywhere anytime soon. Want me to keep going?
Yeah, you're on a roll.
All right, so parentage, this is another big one. New Jersey has really good protections for LGBTQ folks who are parents. So if you adopt your child, if you're a second parent to a child, we currently have a lot of policies in New Jersey that make it not easy, but a lot easier than a lot of other states for queer folks to be the official legal parents of their own children. These are just some things that maybe would be helpful to do if you do have a child that you've adopted that maybe your partner's biologically related to or that neither of you are biologically related to, making sure that you have a judgment on file just in case anything were to happen federally in regards to parentage. This is also one I'm happy to talk more about with folks one-on-one, and I have great resources for this too if anyone has questions about this. Fertility, another important thing for folks who might be looking at starting a family. Folks don't always realize that maybe if they've preserved any of their genetic material, it's not always stored in the same state. So if you do have genetic material preserved, like sperm or eggs, good idea to go check, see where it's stored, make sure that there are, protections if they need to be moved. Those are all things that you can do. And just in general, making sure that you do have all of your legal documentation up to date in regards to what you want, what your partner wants. The more you have, the better, I think is the point, is that get that information on paper if you need to work with someone for assistance on that. Estate planning, similarly, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but making sure that your legal documentation is in order. Again, not likely that anything is going to happen immediately or overnight or maybe at all in regards to any of this, but it is a good idea to have a will for everyone and make sure that, if you have if you were in a queer relationship, that you, whether you're married or not, that your will clearly states what you want to happen, anything in regards to your estate. Name and gender markers. So New Jersey has pretty great supports for folks who are looking to change their name and gender marker. You can obtain a court order. You do not need to provide a specific reason. You can say it's because you're trans, and that's not a problem. I did it recently, and it was not a problem. And I know many people who have in New Jersey and not had a problem with that. It does take a little while, so it's a great idea to get started on this if it's something you're thinking about right now. Get your identification changed and updated. It is not that hard to do, although it can be a little confusing. We currently in the United States have the option for a non-binary gender marker, so you can put an X on your passport, but a lot of folks still make the choice to not do that because essentially you are immediately outing yourself then if you give someone that legal documentation. So it's something to consider if it's something you want or something that might work well for you. And also you can change your gender marker on your passport and on Social Security, your Social Security card without that name change judgment or court order. So you can just go ahead and do that on your own. Again, we have some resources for that towards the end, and I can provide you with more if you need more.
We're going to once again broaden the scope a little bit. AJ did already talk about, what that marriage decision might mean. Should it be taken up by the Supreme Court? And we talked about how in New Jersey, it's not likely that we'll see that go anywhere. We're going to once again review some current federal protections, and then we're going to talk about how federal and state kind of interact with one another.
Yeah, so just some different areas that maybe we are concerned about that maybe we didn't even know we have protections in. So employment, housing, education, anti-violence, there are current federal protections for LGBTQ plus folks in all of these areas. And there are also state protections on top of that in many places, but these cover everyone in the US. So I already mentioned Bostock v. Clayton County earlier, but that prevents employment discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. We also have the Fair Housing Act, similarly prevents discrimination on these bases. Title IX, and we have an executive order, but both of these prohibit discrimination in schools in particular. And then the Matthew Shepard Hate Crimes Prevention Act essentially classifies crimes against folks based on gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, et cetera, as hate crimes. Some more, again, we talked about marriage already, but I want to take a minute on this because I think most of us probably know about the decision that established the right to same-sex marriage that happened in 2015, but a lot of people that I've talked about this with don't know that we have a relatively new piece of legislation called the Respect for Marriage Act. So this was passed in 2022. And what this does is allow folks who are married in a state where marriage equality is legal or enshrined in law, that marriage can be recognized in any other state and federally recognized as well. So I think this is really important for us to know with that looming fear of marriage equality potentially being overturned or taken away. Even if that were to happen, and as I already talked about, hopefully it won't, but even if that were to happen, if folks went and got married in a state where it still is legal in that state, federally and in their state that they live in, those states are required to recognize those marriages. So even if it were to be made illegal in one individual state, like we looked at that map early on with all those, red states. Even if it were to be made illegal in those places, folks could still travel, get married in places where it is legal, and then their marriage is still recognized legally in their state and federally. So that's a really important protection that currently doesn't necessarily matter that much, but might matter in the future. I didn't touch on the healthcare as well. There's obviously lots of concerns about this. We do currently have some protection specifically in the Affordable Care Act. We'll see what happens with that. But one good thing that did just happen, I included this because it was, I think, just last week, federally we extended the ability for folks to access testosterone through telemedicine only. You can imagine why this might be important. Folks who are not able to go in person to a doctor to access that care, including potentially folks who live out of state, are able to get those telemedicine prescriptions for another year. So not actually having to go in person to a doctor, potentially very often. A lot of doctors, if you don't know, have really long wait lists for this kind of thing. Can be a lot easier, lower barrier for folks who have been out, have support, and are just trying to get their medication without jumping through a lot of hoops.
And so in case it wasn't clear already, as kind of AJ's been hinting throughout, it's absolutely understandable and relatable to have concerns about what the future holds. But I want you to hone in on the second bullet here. If the federal law is proposed or passed, if a Supreme Court decision is made or overturned, it is most likely that rather than banning something like marriage, the ability to legislate will go back to the states. And so I want to take that breath we breathed before, and I want to sit in that again, and I want to let folks know that in New Jersey, we have a lot of protections enshrined in our state legislation. We are going to be okay, and we are going to talk about some of the groups that are doing some different advocacy work to make sure we stay okay, and that are doing that work in those states as well, should you be a person who wants to get involved. Because as I said before, that is a healthy coping mechanism for some, and a coping mechanism that some really like to do. Before we move on to that, anything else on here?
Yeah, another thing I want to draw everyone's attention to hopefully make you feel better is a lot of bills get proposed every year. I mentioned those 600 and something active anti-LGBTQ bills that are in our state, right? Or not in our state, in our country right now. The great majority, if not almost all of those, will never get passed and made law. So we can go and read the text of some of these bills that have been proposed, and it can be so scary and so awful, and know that the great majority of those are not ever going to even be brought for a vote, let alone become law. So you can put anything out there. That does not mean that it is something we need to spend all of our time and energy on. So kind of knowing where maybe our energy and our efforts need to be focused is also really important when we talk about the next step of actually engaging in some of this advocacy work.
Yeah. There's a resource I want to shout out that you'll see it on a slide in a moment, but it relates directly to what you're just saying about how bills can just be put out there and proposed. If you are someone who wants to get all nerdy about it and really look into what's being proposed and what's out there and what the status of each of these bills are, the ACLU has an LGBTQ legislation tracker webpage where you can take a look. You could filter it by state, you could filter it by category of law, and it paints a really beautiful picture of okay, what's a currently active bill? What bills have been, has the kibosh been put on? What bills have, unfortunately, moved forward? And kind of what the status is of each of those right now. So as AJ mentioned before, over 600, I think, active bills, but they update that website daily. So you could see, are we down to 597 now? Or some of those rejected? It's such a great tool. You'll see it linked here. In case you are not someone who's gonna follow through on the reach out, I know I'm the type where I'm I need to reach out for these resources. Sometimes I forget to do that. This is a really easy one to just Google ACLU, LGBT legislation tracker, and you can go and see it all right there. They have a wonderful interactive map. So now, we're gonna talk about different advocacy efforts and how, if you were interested, how could you get involved? I want to preface this by saying, you are not obligated to. Some of us, we all cope in different ways. Sometimes we need to disconnect. I know it's difficult for me to watch the news still, and so I'm choosing not to engage in that still. I want to let everybody know we are not here to call anyone to action. We are simply letting you know of the different organizations that are active, and letting you know how you could get involved should you be interested in doing so.
And I'll add to that too, that the action that you take does not have to be going to school board meetings and standing up and speaking. It does not have to be that kind of advocacy if that's not your kind. If it is, we encourage you to do that. But advocacy can be something as small as, talking to someone that you know and love who maybe just doesn't understand some of this stuff, or helping reassure someone, providing, some comfort for someone who wasn't able to be here today and has some of these concerns. So those are important things for you to do as well as an ally, as a queer person yourself, to engage in advocacy on your level. So I'll say, I am calling you to action to engage in some level of advocacy. It doesn't have to be legislative advocacy, but there is a lot that you can do on an individual level, whether it's with yourself, your family, your friends, your smaller community. There are things that I think can match everyone's comfort with advocacy.
And we're going to touch upon some of those different ways you could take care of yourself and take care of the people that are directly connected to you in your immediate community in our third part of the agenda here.
Yeah. So how do you actually go about doing it if you're interested in legislative advocacy and activism? I really like this graphic because it gives you really concrete steps for kind of how these things happen, right? Or what levels they can happen on. So this might be something if you are more interested in being involved in legislature or advocacy on this higher level that you can use, right? So what do some of these mean? Fostering legislative action, right? Actually, step one, reaching out to your elected officials too. Sometimes people think that that's a really hard thing to do. It's a lot of work, and it so does not have to be. It can be as easy as clicking an email template to be sent to your elected official, or making a phone call. Whenever I talk about this to people, I say, make sure that your elected officials know you and are annoyed by you, because mine are annoyed by me because I am always on them. They know how I feel about things. But that's effective, right? And that's important, and it only has to take a few minutes of your time. You don't have to get on the phone. If you don't want to talk on the phone, you can send an email, you can send a letter. This is effective, right? When people hear from the folks who are their constituents. You can also contact your school boards. A lot of people don't know that. So contact your school boards if they're one of those ones. I know some of those school boards too are real sick of me after this past year. If that's your kind of thing, then yeah, do it. You can and should reach out. So understanding and knowing what's out there too, the policies that are there, helping to advocate for policies that you see being proposed that you want to happen, right? Yes, I want you to vote yes on this bill, or, no, this is really bad. We don't want you to do this. Go on, you can read all of these, but just some good starting points, I think.
Yeah, and I'll just shout out again, and especially with these next, I would say 3 or 4 slides, these are the ones that if you reach out to us, we're happy to provide you with all of this. This is something we put together for members of the community, to educate themselves on the information and then to get involved should they so choose. So for example, I'm going to show you this slide here. I just spoke a little bit about a legislation tracker. Obviously, if you type some of those things into Google, you're not going to get anything. But if you reach out and you would like access to this, you'll be able to click on those links and it'll take you to all these different trackers. I already shouted out MAP, M-A-P, with that map at the beginning. I shouted out the ACLU, but there are many more than just those two. Mm-hmm. There are easy ways to check elected officials' voting records. There are resources that outline the rights that you have as an individual or that your kid has, in schools. There are so many different ways to access this information, but I know from experience and from talking with young people and with teachers, it can feel overwhelming to access that information, just to simply find it. So I'm telling you, we're happy to do that legwork for you. We've got it here. You can let us know, and we're gonna give it to you. We're gonna help you with that information.
You might want to check and see if you can put it on our website, so it's even easier for people just to go on our
Absolutely. So you heard it here, folks. We're going to have it on our website. We'll figure out how to do that. Should you be interested in accessing this prior to it being on our website, hitops.org, you can reach out to us directly. I'll put our email addresses up a little later on. Another thing that is really important that people sometimes maybe feel like doesn't, have an impact is to share your story. To simply connect with others is so powerful, and AJ referenced that already. It's just simply, sharing who you are, how you feel, and hearing from others. There are ways to do that in your personal life, and there are ways to do it on grander schemes. I don't know if you wanted to say any more about that.
Yeah, no, just that, if you are comfortable sharing your story, that can have a really big impact on legislators who maybe don't spend all day hearing directly from their constituents, who maybe are, not thinking about the people who that piece of policy is affecting. So if you're comfortable doing that, sharing your story, whether that's getting up and speaking at a school board meeting, like I said, or calling or emailing to make sure that the people who are making these laws know there are real people who are going to be affected by these policies and this legislation. And there are some I love the links on here to help you kind of think about how to share your story in a way that's effective.
And just some more kind of specific, shout outs of organizations. You see GLSEN linked here, you see PFLAG linked here. These are organizations that for decades in some cases have been, fighting for the rights of LGBTQ folks and providing resources. So, GLSEN, for example, is a great resource for educators and people who work directly with kids in a classroom setting. PFLAG is a wonderful organization to be aware of if you are a parent, family member of an LGBTQ individual. Of course, we at HiTOPS have support groups for folks, but this is the kind of thing that we love to shout out. We shout out other people that do this wonderful work too, because it takes a lot, and it's so important that all of us are doing this work in partnership with one another.
Yeah, and I'll add in particular that, with this slide, of course, we're going to share all these resources, but make sure that the people that you know and love are also aware of these resources, right? So you're here, you're seeking to educate yourself, but for folks, like I said earlier, for folks who are feeling worried and are unsure, these in particular are really clear, straightforward resources about what your rights actually are, what to do if your rights are violated, and just providing folks with that easy access to resources. It's not always that easy to find this stuff, unfortunately. So, it might be that kind of social media activism where you post something on your stories. It might be sending things directly to people that you care about. But bringing that awareness and making it easily accessible is important and is definitely a type of advocacy.
Absolutely. These are just some different organizations. You're going to see the slide once more a little later on. Again, just some shout outs here. If you were not aware of these organizations, these are some of those organizations doing that advocacy work, providing those resources, et cetera. But I think unless you wanted to spend any time on any particular one, we'll move forward.
Yeah.
Awesome. So throwing a lot of information at you, and it can feel overwhelming. I absolutely understand that. Hopefully it's felt a bit uplifting as citizens of New Jersey, the information we've shared with you tonight. But as a social worker and as a counselor, we couldn't not discuss coping mechanisms and self-care strategies. And so some of this, if you've been to any sort of, self-care or read a self-help book, things of that nature, it might feel like, yeah, okay, I can imagine this, but I want to be so deliberate and intentional about sharing with you just some different things that you could do in your day-to-day that might make you feel better, that might allow you to cope in a healthier way. And so, when we think about self-care, we broke it down into 3 major categories here, which is the mental health and emotional care piece, it's physical self-care, and then we'll spend a little bit more extra time on the collective care piece, because I think that's not one maybe our brains automatically go to. I think when we're looking to care for ourselves, we often consider, okay, what can we do for our mental state, emotional state, and our physical body? And so we'll fly through that piece here. Of course, we'll spend a little bit of time on it, but we'll really focus in on collective care. So with mental health and emotional self-care, And I want to shout out, I'm like looking at a camera here because I know people are watching online. I want to shout out to our young people too, because I think for many young people, maybe these are things you haven't considered, and I really, really invite you to consider. Acknowledge what you're feeling and know that it's okay to not be happy all of the time. Know that it is absolutely typical to feel frustration, to feel unsettled, especially in situations like these where the stakes feel high, where there is a little bit of uncertainty about what is to come. You know, if you ignore or suppress these emotions, that can intensify anxiety, stress, and we want you to feel happy, we want you to feel good. And so take time to check in with yourself. Mindfulness, meditation, journaling, as cheesy as it sounds, folks, and I'm saying it in this way because I'm delivering a message to our young people watching, because I know some of our group members are, really take the time, be deliberate. It sounds silly when an adult tells you to journal, but adults, hopefully some of you can even get behind me and say, oh yeah, when I write my stuff out and just get it on paper or get it out of my brain and into some tangible thing, it feels better. You know, I'm the type of person, I love to like write my stuff out, write my feelings out, and then rip it up because that is cathartic for me. So I invite you to experiment with things that are gonna make you feel good, kiddos. Like just give it a try. Give it a try and see what's gonna help you, see what's gonna feel better. And never forget that you are who you are and should be proud of who you are. Affirm your own worth. Your identity, you know, your identity, you're a person who learns, who constantly evolves. We all are, not just young people, us adults too. We're constantly learning about ourselves. We are constantly evolving, but who you are at your core, that kind person you are, that affirming person you are worthy, and know that no matter what happens, you are deserving of this self-care. You are deserving of a healthy mental state. I know we take time to deliberately celebrate our youth and tell them how awesome they are, but youth and adults, celebrate yourself. You're here tonight, that's an amazing thing. You work hard, that's an amazing thing. You care for the other people in your life, that's an amazing thing. Don't forget how freaking awesome you are. You can see I get really worked up here because this is my jam. This is what I love talking to young
That's
people
what gets
about.
you worked up.
It
How much
is.
you want everyone to love themselves.
I want everyone to love themselves. And I already mentioned this, and this one, not just for the young people, the adults too. Limit your exposure. If hearing about it all the time, being constantly bombarded is the thing that sets you off, put it down. I deleted my Facebook, I know, in the 2016 election. I still got the other apps though, so I still get it all the time. I had to delete TikTok for a little bit. You know, we're not even gonna talk about Twitter right now. But, you know, take the time to step away. I know a lot of the parents I work with, you know, they've made the choice to, you know, if they were a home that had the news network on at night, you know, maybe they're not doing that so much anymore. That's okay. Give yourself permission and don't feel guilty by doing that. I know sometimes you might feel tempted to feel guilty where it's like, oh, I should be more informed or I should be engaged. And I'm telling you, do it only to the degree where you can stay, you know, content, if not happy. Grounding techniques, you know, as a counselor, I'm gonna shout out the grounding techniques, deep breathing, you know, focusing on your senses, wiggling those toes deliberately. Listen, I'm seeing some laughs in the audience right now too, but I'm telling you, it works. We learn about it, you know, as counselors and social workers, we learn these grounding techniques for a reason. In talking with kids, they've told me it sounds silly, and then I've made them do these practices and they go, I feel so much better. They work, friends. And of course, be gentle with yourself. It's okay to take a step back and just do something that's gonna make you feel good and happy, so long as that thing is not harming yourself. And I have to say, and I'll say it again in another slide in a little bit, but if you are in a mental or emotional state in which you can't get out of, or you feel you can't get out of, reach out to somebody. Tell a trusted adult if you're a young person. If you're an adult, tell a trusted friend. You know, I can't shout out the benefits of therapy enough. If you are not someone who sees a therapist and you've been going through it, hey, reach out to us. We'll connect you to somebody and get you help, because it's so important that we all have someone to debrief with, that we all have someone to reflect with. Sometimes it's hard to do that on our own, so reach out if you are in need of help. Now, physical self-care, this is when the kids roll their eyes at me when I say you need to get your sleep, kiddos. Adults, you too. You too, adults, because I know so many of us don't get the sleep we need. These are the things that are going to make us feel good. Sleep, rest, and of course, engaging in physical activity. For some, we put it off, right? It's like we're working, we're going to this presentation. I don't have time to work out today because I'm going to be with HiTOPS later tonight at the library. I get it. Some days we don't have time for it, but physical activity can be a really stress-relieving thing too. Now, I want to focus on this collective care piece. You can see this image here. Collective care, it is what it sounds like. It's us coming together. It's us recognizing what can we do, what can we contribute to be a part of this greater system. I love, love, love this quote at the bottom of this graphic here that says, we have to build relationships that are stronger than our institutions. Sometimes we maybe lack trust in institutions. Sometimes it may feel like the institution was not made for us or by us, and it's not benefiting us. The relationships we have with people are what can make all the difference in our lives.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've been emphasizing to the LGBTQ plus folks in my life is spending time in your community can be really powerful and healing. I know it is for me and for so many other folks. So if that's what you need right now, do that, right? Find that community, build that community, take care of those that you're in those relationships with, right? Those relationships that are strong, that make you feel good. So not just seeing this as the need to take care of everyone around you, but that this is a way of taking care of yourself as well, because engaging in community and engaging specifically in collective care is a way for you to help yourself by helping others, and then to receive help when you need it too, right?
I love the way you put that, a way for you to help yourself while helping others. And I think we've broken it down a little bit here on how, collective care can help you. Lean on the people around you when you need to. Lean on your chosen family. As LGBTQ people, many of us, we have our biological families. Some of us are connected with our biological families still, and some of us aren't. Chosen family is such an important thing. Whether you are connected with your biological family or not, we still have chosen families, and these are the people that we can talk with and debrief with and reflect with and maybe engage in those grounding practices with, because it's always more fun to do it with another person. Lean on the people around you. Trust that they'll hold you and care for you, because you would do the same for them. Check in with folks, check in with loved ones. I know for me, when I'm feeling down or sad, when I can sit in that and recognize that feeling, but then reach out to a friend and say, hey, I was just thinking about you and I wanted to know how you're doing. That makes me feel better. Like, not even just venting and talking about my own problems to my friends, but to just reach out in a time of sadness and say to my friend, I care for you and I want to know how you are doing. By the time that conversation's over, I feel better. Another really important thing about maintaining happiness and health is knowing and communicating your boundaries. So maybe you're not ready or interested in having these discussions with the people in your immediate community. That's okay too. These conversations might happen around you and people might try to engage you in them, but you can say, I'm not interested in talking about that right now, or I don't have the capacity to do that right now. And you deserve the respect for a person to acknowledge that and say, okay, I understand. So really assert your boundaries and stand firm in it. I'm getting all worked up. I'm like, now, collective care for your community. How can collective care, how can you make a difference in this grander scheme, right? There's big ways and there's small ways, and I'll just throw everything up here right now. AJ's already referenced it. We've already shown it on slides. Getting involved and knowing what the community's needs are is the first step here. It's like, okay, I'm recognizing this to be a need, and here's what I can contribute. It could be the smallest thing, but whatever you can contribute, even if it's just a conversation with another person, that is enough. And that is enough to make you feel better and another person feel better. And of course, we have these tangible ways, right? Tangible ways of caring for our community and the people in it. I'm not going to read them all out or read the slide to you, but there are small ways and bigger ways to take action. If you are someone who might be interested in taking action or know that doing so will help you feel better, then I encourage you to do that. Before I move on.
No, I feel like you said it all.
All right. I told you I'd show you this again, that taking action piece, so I just wanted to give the refresher of the different organizations you can choose to engage with if you are interested in taking action in some of those bigger or what might feel more tangible ways. But I promise you, anything is enough, even if it's just holding space for yourself. It's enough.
Yeah. Yeah, we frame it as like small things and big things, but really they're all, there's no hierarchy of advocacy or of community care, collective care. Doing any of these things can be really, really important. One of the things we put on there is displaying outward signs of support. I think that's a huge, huge thing that, maybe we think it's not a big deal to have like a rainbow pin on our backpack or to wear a Protects Trans Folks shirt, but I'm going to share a very brief story from yesterday. I went to go get my hair cut, which is a fraught experience for queer and trans people usually. And I, walked into the barber shop feeling really nervous. And the guy who was about to cut my hair was wearing a shirt that said Protect Trans Folks. And immediately I felt 100 times better just by having something like that. If you work somewhere, have a pride flag in your pen cup, that's what I always say. And it immediately can make a huge difference in your colleagues and your clients' perceptions and comfort. So that little thing can make a huge, huge difference.
And we're approaching our kind of final piece here that we've prepared. I just wanted to make kind of one final plea to young people, one final just piece of, something that hopefully and maybe can help. Recognizing that you may feel powerless at times, but knowing that you can make a difference. I know we've just been talking about it, but to our young people in particular, I wanted to talk about some of the tangible things you could do to help your friends and to help yourself. You might be someone who has deep empathy for others, and you might, want to engage in some of this, and sometimes it's hard to know how to help, and so I just really wanted to lay it out for our young people, what you can do if you want to or are feeling compelled to help the people around you. You can let your friends know it's okay to feel sad or confused and just be a listening ear for them. But if they don't want to talk, remember, don't make anybody talk, right? We talked earlier about asserting boundaries, and I think respecting boundaries is just as important as asserting your own. I want to remind our young people and our adults in the room that sometimes offering solutions is not what someone is looking for. Sometimes we just need to be that listening ear. Being understanding, I think this is one that we can all use reminders of sometimes. Sometimes people do and say things that may hurt us or that may feel offensive. And it's really important to know that in times of stress, in times of uncertainty, sometimes people require a little bit of room to express themselves the way they need to. Now, that doesn't give anybody an excuse to harm anybody else, but kiddos especially know that if your friend says something really crappy, that doesn't have to be the end of a friendship. That can be a continuing conversation. And of course, don't take on too much. Young people especially, do not take on too much. If a friend is expressing things to you that seem and feel out of your control or that you don't have any power over and you feel like you need help, tell a trusted adult. Tell a trusted adult when it feels like it's too much for you. Now, of course, help yourself. Don't run from your feelings. Let yourself feel them. Let yourself be sad. Know that there are people there to help. Talk to someone about how you feel. I so often talk and work with parents who say, oh, my kiddo's just locking themselves in their room. And I don't really know how to engage. It's such a difficult thing to know. How do I get them to communicate? And sometimes parents, you're not the one they need to be communicating with. Sometimes they might need a peer. Sometimes they might need an additional support. Just know everyone, but especially young people, reach out. Do not sit in your feelings alone if those feelings are persistent. I already shouted out journaling. I'm telling you, it's my favorite thing to do, so I just needed to shout it out again. Journal, rip it up, feel it, and let it go. Take a bath. These are the cheesy ones. Meditation, breathing, counting. We do it for a reason, friends. And know that there's no timeline. on any of this. You might feel sad, you might feel angry, let yourself feel it, but do not stew in it. Reach out. If you can't come out of it even temporarily during the day, you need to have pockets of happiness in order to, feel okay in this world. So we need to help you find those pockets of happiness. You can take as long as you need to feel better, but if you're having trouble finding those pockets of happiness, reach out to somebody who can help you. In short, friends, we are indeed stronger together. We're going to sit up here just for a few brief moments to see if anyone that's here with us in the room has any questions or things they'd like a little bit more information about. But if you wanted to snap a photo, I saw some people snapping photos of slides. If you wanted a way to reach out to us, this is our email contact information. As I shared, we will find a way to put the presentation on our website so you have access to it. But if you're one of those people that's like, I need it now, you can email us and I'll get it to you tomorrow, all right? So it's right here. Here are our socials. AJ and I were talking about the wonderful events that we host as an organization. All of that is going to be found here on our socials. And so please get involved and say hi to us and come join the HiTOPS community. Leave that up for a second and we'll come sit over here and take some questions from folks in the room.
Wow, that was... and I want to, Jen, actually, if you can come up here as well, please. So, you met me earlier. I'm Janie. This is Jen Appel. She is one of our newest librarians here at the Princeton Public Library, having joined us at the end of September, and she's our teen services librarian. And so, I think what Jen and I both want you to know, and I'll just say it, I've worked here for a long time, 25 years, and I am a very, very strong ally. I've led the planning for the Princeton Community Pride Picnic. Proud mom of an LGBT youth, and so I'm an ally here. And if you are a youth in Princeton, or anybody in Princeton, this is your safe space, and we are open 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. We're open on weekends, we're open Sunday, and Jen, you can come to the third floor, find Jen, find me, I'm on the second floor. But all of our staff, we are all affirming, and we all want you to know that this library, you are safe. Want to say anything else, Jen?
Thank you. Yeah, I am new here, but I'm really excited to get started. I am a teen services librarian who is especially focused on supporting LGBTQ plus youth. That was something that was really important to me as an LGBTQ plus youth growing up, finding resources and sanctuary at my library. For anybody interested, adults included, because YA books are very good. We do have a selection that I brought down from our collection. You can actually check these out and take them home, or if you want to head up to the third floor and browse, we have so much more I could not carry by myself down here today. So this is just a very light selection of related nonfiction titles. We have so much more. We have online resources as well for people who are watching at home and are interested. You can browse our catalog, our website, and follow our social media because we are also promoting LGBTQ plus organizations we're partnering with and our own programs as well coming up.
Yeah, we do have, it's up year-round, we do have a Pride resource guide. We update it annually for June to list the current month's events, but that includes on that Pride resource guide on our website, you can find reading lists, you can find community resources, you can find a whole bunch of organizations, and we're going to work with Jen to get that even further updated and make it more vibrant. So this is your chance now to ask questions of our experts here. Is there something else that, they covered so much, but what are your thoughts? Is there something out there in the audience that you would like to have answered? Okay, yes.
I know there's quite a few people who've announced their candidacies for governor in both parties for next year, and I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about who would be supportive of further positive legislation.
It's a good question. I'm not endorsing anyone. I still want to do more research and see, what happens. I will say I'm tentatively excited about Mikey Sherrill. I think she's probably my favorite candidate so far. But again, I'm holding my endorsement back until I know more about everyone.
Echo.
And HiTOPS doesn't endorse
Yes. No, we're not endorsing.
No, we do have our hearing loop. So for those using our hearing aids, I just want to make sure we have that on the microphone so everybody, if they're listening with a hearing device, can hear that as well.
Oh, what I just said? Oh, yeah. Oh, as a 501c3, HiTOPS does not endorse any candidates.
And nor does the library. Just for the record. But yes, we are coming into an election year for the governor, and so taking a close look at what each candidate stands for in this area will be important to anybody voting, or whoever you decide to vote for.
And if you're looking for resources to look into different candidates, that is something we can help provide you with. So please feel free to reach out, and we'll send you all the things to read. We love reading at HiTOPS.
Has,
Of course, at the library
we love
as well.
reading too, but we have resource guides available as well for elections. Did we have a question back here?
Oh, Eve, hang on.
B's like, oh my God. I can.
There's a question here about 101.5 radio station. So is there a question for it? Yeah, we do.
Hi, I wasn't going to say anything, but there are a couple of us elected officials here, although I'm on my way out, but Dan Weiss is an elected official in West Windsor. For those of you who don't know, I'm leaving Princeton Council. So, of course, as an elected official, it's like, you know, when you have a hammer, everything is a nail. So I'm going to just make a real pitch for getting involved in both, you know, Virginia and New Jersey. All eyes. We were ignored during the presidential election, rightly so. All eyes are going to be on New Jersey and Virginia next year. Now is the time to make a statement about our values. So please get involved in some way. And the other thing I just wanted to add a little bit, which your presentation was absolutely fabulous, really wonderful. I have other adjectives, but I'll skip them. I just want to add one suggestion is there's a lot of data about the mental health benefits of being outside in nature. And I'm very close to a lot of nature advocates in town. So I just want to suggest that as you go forward with something like this, that you stress getting outside 10, 15 minutes in a green space, so valuable for mental health and peace, and do it with a friend, and it's even better.
And that is something I will endorse.
Yes. I co-sign that.
And rain smells amazing.
That's true.
To say, so yeah, this is Eve Niedergang. She's one of our council persons, and we just scored 100 on that index that's put out by, what's the organization that puts out the index?
I think it's the HRC.
Humans, is it? Yeah.
Friday.
So Princeton has for several years now, and that was in large part thanks to the work by Nick DiDimonzio when he was our LGBTQ plus representative. So if you don't, I mean, you can get involved in politics without running in an election. There's several commissions and committees, and we have one here in Princeton called CARES, which does have LGBTQ plus representation on it. It's all about housing fairness and social equity and justice. And that's just a committee. It's not, you don't have to run, you just, you know, put up your interest in being involved. And so since we have Eve here, if you're interested in getting involved, you can ask Eve about that and how that works.
I know Dan from the West Windsor Democratic Club. I know Dan from the West Windsor Democratic Club. He was the president before he was elected. That's another, if anyone's from West Windsor, that's another really good, and you're a Democrat, another really cool organization.
So there's lots of ways to get involved. And I think up here, Jen even put out a great book called Civic Minded, What Everyone Should Know About the U.S. Government. That might not be, yeah, okay.
Adults are allowed to read that one too.
So we're allowed to read that one too. Are there other questions? We still have a few minutes left. Oh, I think over there, Jen B has a question.
So I was just wondering, so I'm from a neighboring municipality too. I'm a school board member in Hamilton Township. Only speaking for myself here tonight, but I would love to know if you take the show on the road, because I worked in Princeton for well over a decade, and Princeton's a very progressive town, so it did not surprise me at all that, I mean, obviously, and this is your home, but that you would present here, but I would love to see something like this in Hamilton, where the community's diverse, you know, but open, you know, and I think there would be many parents as well as students or young individuals that would really appreciate a presentation like this as well.
I'm so glad you asked. We are constantly at HiTOPS trying to forge relationships with communities all over, and our reach really has extended. We are working in districts throughout New Jersey. We are in Pennsylvania, pockets of Pennsylvania. I've led professional development, you know, for example, as the senior education manager, I've led it remotely for districts in California, which is like amazing. It's like, how did you find us, right? So all I would say is if you would be interested in having something like this or, you know, in more formal professional development opportunities for youth serving professionals or community-based organizations, we absolutely welcome you to make connections. Throw me on an email with somebody that has some stake in the game, and I will coordinate how we can make that happen. Yeah. Absolutely.
And
thank you.
we do other topics too.
Yeah,
like if there's
so
a
much.
specific topic that you're, you know, if we don't have it, we can do it. So if there's a specific topic that you feel like, you know, whether it's your place of work or, you know, your school district or whatever, we can definitely do our thing there too.
And Thomas, did you not tell me that you were planning to do this virtually again in January, this same thing?
Correct.
Yes. Is it going to be on Zoom?
So we are going to be hosting this very specifically for our young people at HiTOPS. That doesn't mean, though, it's going to be exclusively for our group members. We will make sure that that gets announced, but we're going to host this remotely one time with a little bit more of a youth focus, a little bit more of a youth lens, and some more approachable language as well. So if that's something, if you have a young person in your life that you want to point at this and say, hey, you should think about this, we'll make sure that information gets out there.
Okay. And I think B had a
Great.
question.
Yes,
And then
we have our teen advisory board member has a question here.
Hi.
Hi, B.
Hi. I'm a senior at Princeton High School and also a member of the teen advisory board here at the Princeton Public Library, so shout out to them. When I was a junior at Princeton High School, I participated in a program called Teen Pep, which is Princeton High School's sex education program where juniors basically give the sex education for freshmen, which is a really great organization that was started a number of years ago and is spreading all over New Jersey, which is awesome. And currently a member of the peer group, which is the senior version of that. But I did have a question about the curriculum of Teen Pep because it was designed a little while ago. The goal of Teen Pep is inclusion and is a sort of wider range of sex education, which is great. There are a couple of things, especially in the way that members of Teen Pep are trained. So I know that in a lot of the lessons that we received as Teen Pep members or educators, there were a couple of lessons that made people feel a little bit isolated, and by people I mean me mostly, as there were 22 members of the Teen Pep organization, and I was the only non-binary person on that. I was the only queer representation other than one other person, and then the only non-binary representation. So there's that, which is also a thing in and of itself. But in the education of our, like in the ways that we presented our information to the freshmen and in the ways that we were educated, there were some issues that I could spot and some flaws in the ways that the lesson plans were designed. And I think just some gaps in the general education that I think it would be really great if we could address. And I didn't know if you knew anything about that or if you had ideas for how to get involved. I know that this is a really top-down educational platform. Like a lot of these decisions are made at a really high level and students don't have a whole lot of say, but I have a lot of things to say, so I didn't know if you guys had any suggestions for how I could get that across, because as I understand it, this year there is no queer representation, not a single person on the Teen Advisory Board who is queer or who identifies as non-binary, and I was happy to bring that representation to my group of Teen Pep people and to the freshman community at large, but I was educating 400 freshmen on queer sex ed, and there was not a lot for me to work on. Also, it's a very scripted thing, so there's limits on what I was allowed to say. So from a person who has experienced this and who has tried to give these kinds of talks, it's really tough and there needs to be more of it. And so I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on like how I could get involved.
Oh, B, that is complicated question. I'll say a few things. I can't speak directly on the Teen Pep curriculum. What I do have knowledge about is kind of what's been recommended by sex education advocacy orgs, right? So I could point you in the direction of like, here is some formal stuff that's been put together that many districts that are implementing comprehensive sex ed are using. And so I think what I can give you here is just reference back to what we were sharing about making your voice heard. I heard you say that it feels really difficult and impossible, and it's a top-down situation, right? And it feels, I have complicated feelings about what I'm about to say, because I don't feel that anyone should feel obligated to be the person to stand up and do the work. But somebody has to do the work for the work to get done. So I told you I have complicated feelings about what I was going to say. B, what I could say for you is I think that if you were to gather resources and information and then gather support and then present that to people who maybe do have some decision-making capability within your district, it likely, as you think about it, feels like an insurmountable thing, but you've got to start somewhere, right? So even if you get the ball rolling this year as this fierce, amazing, non-binary person who is an advocate that you are, you're a senior, you're about to step out of that high school, but maybe if you started the work this year, maybe those freshmen who will be juniors one day and be in this program might feel that change. And so I would say, reach out to us.
Yeah, that's...
We are more than happy to be involved. You know, HiTOPS had a very long-standing relationship with the Princeton Public School District that is not currently a formal partnership, but as a former employee of the district, you know, I'm very, very passionate about what happens in the schools in this community. And so I'm going to speak for both of us and say we would be more than happy and interested to help you craft what you would like to bring forward to people in your district. So
Yeah, you never have to be the one person, right? If you think that you are the one person, then okay, that means it's time to form your little advocacy coalition. So, you know, whether that's coming to professionals who do this kind of work, or even in your case, maybe it would be a good idea to like go to your school's GSA and bring this to them, like, hey, this is a problem I've identified, like, can everyone help? I mean, listen, I know, but like, you know what I'm saying? Just as a general, maybe it's something you're saying, hey, HiTOPS, like, you know, do you want to collaborate with the young adult spot to help me compile these resources so that I can present this? That's what I would just add to that, is that like you never have to work alone. Identify the people who can be helpful to you and engage them in that idea that maybe you've conceptualized. But yeah, definitely agree with what you said. Like, somebody's got to do it. So
if you're willing to be that person, we're willing to help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great answer. Yeah, help here. So we're actually at the end of our time, although I think that...
Oh no,
Oh, no.
one more.
One more, okay, one more.
Sorry. Regarding advocacy in the form of like protests and that kind of thing, do you have any resources or organizations that you can recommend on like who have already gotten that ball rolling and like know how to get involved in that kind of thing?
I mean, I would say Garden State Equality in New Jersey is a great way to get started, because they really do specifically like advocacy focused stuff with LGBTQ issues. So following, you know, the Instagram accounts or whatever of some of these more local organizations, and they share opportunities, you know, getting involved with groups, like interest groups, like whether that is HiTOPS, right, because we'll share information when we have it, or like the Pride Center of New Jersey is a really great one, that they have a lot of different specific interest groups, and being in those group chats and stuff, that information gets spread. But following along on social media and just getting involved in some of these organizations that specifically do that work. And then if you are doing things like protests and rallies, just make sure that you're keeping yourself safe as much as possible. That's, again, another resource we could share. But, make sure that you have safe transportation, that you have a plan to, have someone know where you are, your location, that you're there with people, that, if necessary, you are, covering your face, like whatever it is that you need to do to protect yourself. Just make sure that you're doing that if you're engaging in protests or rallies. And I do encourage you to, because it's also a good way to build community.
Excellent. And I actually just want to follow up on what Thomas was saying to be about, you're a senior and you're exiting and you might not see the change that you want. Like, it's not going to happen in your time at PHS, but you don't know the ripple. And I'll just share personally is that when my son was in high school, he advocated for 3 years for that school to get a GSA. It didn't happen when he was there. It happened the year after he graduated, though, and it's still going. And so I think, you have to be the one, and you have to advocate, and you might not see the change, and sometimes it takes 4 years for the change to happen, and that's really hard because then you've graduated, and but there's the knowledge of knowing that now that school has support for students that you didn't have while you were there.
Yeah.
So.
There's a quote I love that's, we plant trees that we do not live to see bear fruit, but someone will be able to benefit from that, right? So even if we don't directly benefit from the work that we're doing, hopefully someone else will.
Excellent.
To that, just real quick, for you and for any other youth that are watching or listening, it may feel like you're alone, but there are LGBTQ plus peers watching you. And you are encouraging them. So your bravery, your voice is being heard, even if it's not seeming like it. So thank you for sitting up and talking and doing what you're doing, because it will encourage others.
Heck, yes.
Yeah, Dee.
And I think on that note, we're going to conclude the broadcast. Thank you to everybody who's been joining us on YouTube. We had quite a few people. More than 30 people at the height, so that was great. Nice. And this recording will be available on the library's YouTube channel. If anybody wants to share, have it replayed, go back and look at the resources again. It will be permanently up there on our YouTube channel. And let's give a big round of applause to our presenters and HiTOPS.